You know, usually when you think about walking a dog, there's this expectation of a very simple transaction.
Right. You grab the leash, go out.
Yeah, exactly. You grab the leash, you do a quick loop around the block, the dog does its business, and you walk back inside. And then you, like, mentally check the exercise box for the day.
It's on the to-do list.
Right. It's somewhere between making your morning coffee and checking your inbox.
And it's treated as this purely physical requirement,
Yeah.
like putting gas in a car. You move the dog a certain distance, the energy tank empties, and, well, peace is restored to the household.
But then you step into the reality of owning a very specific kind of dog, and suddenly that whole simple transaction it's completely turned on its head.
Oh, absolutely.
So imagine this. You've just done that exact walk with your West Highland White Terrier, your Westie.
Yeah.
You sit down on the couch, fully expecting them to just, curl up and sleep.
As one does.
Right. But 4 minutes later, that same dog is standing on the back of the sofa, aggressively barking at, like a leaf blowing across the street.
Just completely wired.
Completely wired. Then they're on the floor, frantically shoving their nose under the edge of the living room rug. And the next thing you know, they're trotting past you with a forbidden sock.
Of course.
And finally, they head out to the garden to excavate a crater with just absolute terrifying enthusiasm.
It is the absolute definition of a biological disconnect. I mean, as the owner, you're sitting there watching this chaos unfold, completely bewildered, just thinking, I just walked you.
Yes.
Like, we literally just moved your legs for 20 minutes. What is happening?
And that scenario right there is the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to decode why your dog is stealing socks right after a physical workout.
It's a very common problem.
It really is. So we're digging into the exercise and behavioral data on the Westie, which is this frequently misunderstood working breed, to explore the massive chasm between merely moving an animal's legs and actually engaging its brain.
And for you listening, I mean, whether you own a terrier, a completely different breed, or honestly no dog at all, this is going to be a fascinating look at psychology and biology.
Yeah, it's really a masterclass in understanding how mechanical movement and purposeful, meaningful activity are just entirely different physiological states.
Exactly, because if a walk around the block didn't stop the dog from turning your living room into a demolition zone, then our fundamental definition of what a walk actually does is heavily flawed.
Moving their legs clearly didn't solve the equation. And I think that's because we tend to just ignore the genetic blueprint.
We do. We see the exterior and ignore the rest.
Right, because Westies are small, they're white and fluffy, which tricks people into thinking, oh, lap dog. But they had this gritty working history in the Scottish Highlands. They were bred to hunt badgers, foxes, rats.
They're active problem solvers.
Yeah, their small, compact body and their intense working drive, they do not cancel each other out.
And that's the crux of the issue right there. Prospective owners look at that cute profile and they just drastically underestimate the neurological engagement that's required.
So it's not just about the physical exertion.
Not at all. If you are just, power walking your Westie for a mile on the pavement, just trying to get it over with, you are merely building their cardiovascular endurance. You really aren't touching their mental needs at all.
I realized something reading through the behavioral data on this. If you just power walk a working breed every single day, you aren't calming them down.
No, you're just building a better athlete.
Exactly. You're creating a super fit menace who is going to need like 3 miles to get tired next week instead of just 1.
You're conditioning them for endurance, not satisfaction. I mean, a purposeful walk has to engage their sensory systems. It involves changing routes, so the visual and olfactory environment is entirely new to them.
Mixing it up.
Right. It involves practicing loose leash walking, maybe integrating quick recall games in a secure area, and essentially forcing their brain to switch gears.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. The mechanics of sniffing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to push back on the human perspective here.
Right.
On behalf of frustrated owners everywhere.
Fair enough.
When you're on a tight schedule, a dog stopping to sniff a single patch of weeds for 2 straight minutes, it feels like they're just stalling.
It can definitely feel that way.
But from a biological standpoint, pulling a working dog away from a scent they are locked onto,
Right.
It's basically the equivalent of someone yanking your phone out of your hand right as you're reading a really critical text message.
That is a perfect analogy. The neuroscience behind that is actually staggering. For a canine, sniffing is not a pause in the action. It is the main event.
Wow.
Yeah, their olfactory bulb is massive compared to ours. A dog devotes roughly 40 times more of their brain to analyzing smells than a human does.
40 times.
40 times. So when a terrier's nose is in the grass, they are processing an incredibly complex data stream, like who was there, the hormonal state of that animal, how long ago they passed by.
So it's essentially their version of scrolling the morning news feed, but with a biochemical twist.
And that biochemical twist is vital, honestly. Processing that dense amount of olfactory data requires an enormous amount of mental glucose. It burns actual calories.
Wait, really? It burns calories just to smell?
Yes. It fatigues the brain. When you take a slightly longer walk that includes dedicated time to just sniff along a hedge, or you hide a few pieces of food in the grass for them to locate, you are exhausting them neurologically.
So that's the key to the calm dog.
Exactly. That dog gets to come home and genuinely settle down. They don't just collapse on the rug from cardiovascular fatigue. They wind down because their problem-solving circuitry was activated and satisfied.
Okay, so if we accept that we had to burn mental glucose on the walk,
Right.
that still leaves us with the indoor environment. Because Westies still have these deeply ingrained evolutionary imperatives to search, to dig, and to dissect.
They absolutely do.
And if we don't provide a sanctioned outlet for those instincts inside the home, they are going to freelance. Which brings us back to the stolen socks.
You can't just flip a switch and turn off centuries of selective breeding. The instinct is hardwired.
Right.
You have to channel those working traits constructively. You do that by giving them a job that taps into what neuroscientists call the seeking system. This is the dopamine-driven pathway in the brain that rewards animals for foraging and exploring.
And the behavioral data suggests search games as this brilliant, low-cost way to trigger that dopamine loop safely.
This is so simple, too.
Yeah, taking a portion of their measured daily food, which inherently helps with weight management, by the way, and hiding it, like scatter it in the grass, roll it up in a towel, or just seal it inside a cardboard box for them to tear open.
It turns a completely mundane breakfast into a high-value puzzle. You're giving them the thrill of the hunt, though obviously you have to supervise this.
Oh, for sure.
Especially in the beginning, just to ensure a frustrated dog doesn't decide to, ingest the cardboard or swallow a piece of the towel.
Now, I have to challenge the data on the concept of digging, because the recommendation is to create one approved digging spot.
Right, a sanction zone.
Yeah, taking safe soil or sand, burying toys or treats in it, and rewarding the dog for unearthing them. But to a lot of people, giving a dog a sanctioned place to dig sounds like encouraging them to destroy the rest of the landscaping.
I hear that all the time.
It feels like giving a toddler a designated mud puddle in the living room and just, hoping they don't migrate to the white carpet.
It's a highly common fear, but it really misunderstands how context-specific canine learning actually is. You are working with the animal's genetics here.
Okay, how so?
A terrier's instinct to dig is so profound that if you try to suppress it entirely with a blanket no-digging rule, you are fighting a losing battle against their neurobiology. By providing a structured outlet, that specific sandbox, you give them the jackpot of unearthing a prize.
The critical piece, though, is that they don't automatically know the difference between approved dirt and forbidden dirt without heavy reinforcement.
Precisely. You have to actively teach the boundary. You reward them heavily when they use the designated box, and you redirect them if they go near the flower beds. You protect your property by giving their instinct a highly rewarding legal target.
That concept of structured redirection, it applies heavily to how we play with them, too. The literature highlights how play cannot just be this unhinged free-for-all.
It really can't.
You need clear start and stop cues, a solid release command, and sturdy toys. But I found the warning against hand-focused wrestling particularly compelling.
Yeah, wrestling with your hands pushes a terrier into an incredibly high state of arousal.
Which is dangerous, right?
Extremely. When they cross a certain neurological threshold, their play drive can flip into predatory drift. They become overstimulated, their bite inhibition drops, and suddenly what started as a fun game results in punctured skin. Fun and rigid structure absolutely must coexist to keep their nervous system regulated.
Which naturally bridges into a huge behavioral myth we need to dissect here. The idea that more exercise automatically cures barking.
Oh, the barking myth.
Yes. Because Westies are notoriously vocal. But if your exhausted dog is standing on the back of the couch, barking at the window, strapping the harness back on, and marching them for another 2 miles, isn't the cure.
No, it requires investigating the underlying trigger. Barking isn't just a byproduct of excess energy. It is a complex vocalization.
So what are they actually saying?
Well, are they barking out of territorial defense? Is it fear-based reactivity? Is it an alert to a perceived threat? Or, perhaps they are experiencing hidden physical discomfort?
So running them more doesn't fix any of that.
Exactly. If you have genuinely satisfied their physical and mental requirements, and they are still vocalizing incessantly, throwing more mileage at the problem is entirely useless. You have to identify the anxiety or the environmental trigger and address that specific root cause.
This brings up a fascinating geographic assumption. We've established that structured mental and physical outlets are absolutely non-negotiable.
Right.
Which leads to this massive misconception that the square footage of your living space dictates whether you can provide a good life for a high-drive dog.
Ah, yes, the classic suburban myth. People constantly assume that living in an apartment disqualifies you from owning a terrier.
But that's not true.
Not at all. The behavioral consensus is that Westies genuinely thrive in apartments, provided there is a strict routine.
But I want to clarify what that routine actually looks like. Letting a dog tear around on slick hardwood floors, using the living room as a racetrack, and repeatedly launching off the sofa, that does not count as exercise.
No, it definitely doesn't.
In fact, biomechanically, the repetitive impact on slippery surfaces is disastrous for their joints over time.
Apartment living requires deep intentionality. It demands solid leash manners, desensitization to stairs and elevators, managing their reactivity to hallway noises, and building a strong foundation for settling calmly indoors. The physical activity happens outside deliberately.
Okay, so let me look at this from the complete opposite side. If I have a massive, beautifully fenced-in suburban yard, the assumption is that I have a built-in dog gym.
People love the yard idea.
All right, I can just open the back door, sip my coffee, and the dog will naturally exercise itself out there.
I would strongly challenge that assumption. Relying on a yard creates a false sense of security. A yard is just a location. It is not an activity.
So what happens when they're just left out there?
Think about what actually happens to a terrier's brain when left alone in a static, fenced space. They develop boundary frustration, they obsessively patrol the fence line, they hyperfixate on the neighbor, they dig in your flower beds, or they actively map out escape routes.
Wow.
They are not out there running wind sprints for cardiovascular health.
They're just finding their own, usually destructive jobs because the environment has become impoverished.
A yard is a fantastic asset, but it is an asset for shared games, for training drills, for supervised scent work. It is not a passive babysitter. Meaningful engagement requires the human to be an active participant.
But what about outsourcing that engagement entirely, like taking them to a dog park? The prevailing logic is that if you have a small dog with big energy, you throw them into the dog park to burn it off with the pack.
That environment is often a neurological nightmare, particularly for a small, assertive breed like a Westie.
Really?
A nightmare. Dog parks are frequently just a cortisol soup. You are dealing with severe size mismatches, wildly unpredictable playstyles, crowding, and, well, relying on the attentiveness of other owners, which is rarely reliable.
It seems like a calm, structured walk alongside one familiar, compatible dog provides far more social value than tossing them into a chaotic group free-for-all.
Absolutely.
There's this strange societal pressure that dogs must go to parks to be socialized, but the data completely contradicts that.
Throwing a dog into an overwhelming, poorly regulated pack can actually induce reactivity or fear-based aggression. It often creates behavioral problems rather than solving them.
Speaking of unpredictable outdoor environments, we have to talk about off-leash recall and the terrier prey drive.
Oh, this is a big one.
You might have a dog that performs a flawless recall in your kitchen for a piece of cheese. But out in the woods, a fleeing squirrel can instantly override hundreds of hours of solid training.
The neurobiology of prey drive is phenomenal. When that limbic system activates, the higher reasoning centers of the prefrontal cortex essentially shut down.
They literally can't hear you. Right?
Yes, there is a phenomenon called auditory exclusion, where the dog literally may not process the sound of you calling their name because all neural resources are diverted to the visual pursuit of the prey.
Which is exactly why relying on off-leash trust with a terrier is a massive gamble, and why secure fencing or long lines are highly recommended. But there is a crucial physics lesson regarding those long lines.
Very crucial.
You cannot just clip a 30-foot rope to your dog's harness and zone out on your phone. You have to actively manage the slack. You must keep the line away from your hands to prevent severe friction burns if they bolt, keep it from tangling around your legs, and critically, you can never allow the dog to hit the end of that 30-foot line at a dead sprint.
The kinetic energy generated by a terrier hitting the end of a long line at full speed could cause devastating soft tissue or spinal damage, even with a harness on. It requires intense situational awareness from the handler.
And on the topic of recall, there's a psychological rule that feels deeply counterintuitive to human nature. If your dog ignores you, runs off, and takes 10 infuriating minutes to finally come back, you cannot punish them.
Even if you are seething with anger, the moment you punish a dog for returning to you, you have poisoned the recall.
Because of how they associate things.
Right. Dogs associate the consequence with the immediate action. If they finally return and you yell at them, you are teaching them that coming to you is a highly aversive experience. You are actively discouraging the exact behavior you need to save their life in the future.
Okay, so our baseline routine demands we be highly engaged, actively managing their environment and their neurobiology. But what happens when we want to push the physical limits?
It's like taking them on adventures.
Exactly. Westies are adventurous. We want to take them on demanding physical outings. How do we safely manage that athleticism?
Well, it starts with respecting the physiological limits of adaptation. You cannot take a dog whose primary exercise is a daily 20-minute neighborhood loop and suddenly drop them into a 5-mile steep elevation mountain hike.
The canine equivalent of the weekend warrior tearing a hamstring.
Exactly that. Hiking is phenomenal for them, but fitness must be progressively loaded. You have to monitor their paw pads for abrasions, manage their hydration, watch the thermoregulation closely because, remember, dogs pant rather than sweat.
And manage the wildlife chasing instinct.
Constantly.
The aftermath of a strenuous hike requires real attention, too. Taking the time to physically inspect their paws, check the nails, and comb through their coat to search for ticks, burrs, or small lacerations they might have completely ignored because their adrenaline was spiking.
It's about proactive maintenance, and the same biological principles apply to running. Healthy, conditioned adult Westies can be fantastic jogging partners, but you have to account for their stride length. The surface you run on dictates the joint impact, and the ambient temperature is critical.
And we have to explicitly call out that puppies are entirely disqualified from forced running. The physiological data is clear. Running a puppy can cause permanent skeletal damage.
A puppy's skeleton is primarily soft cartilage, and their growth plates haven't closed. Repetitive, concussive impact on pavement causes microfractures and disrupts normal bone development.
So what should they do instead?
They require short, exploratory movement and a massive amount of sleep. You actually have to enforce rest periods before they hit the point of physical exhaustion because they often lack the self-regulation to stop on their own.
At the completely opposite end of the spectrum, senior dogs require serious athletic adjustments. They need shorter, highly frequent walks on stable footing. They need extended time to use their olfactory system.
Yes, more sniffing.
And they need a handler who is actively watching for signs of arthritic stiffness, rather than forcing them to maintain a pace they could hit, say, 3 years ago.
It requires checking your own ego at the door, honestly, and letting the dog's current biological reality dictate the activity.
Which ties perfectly into weight management. Because a lot of people try to out-exercise a bad diet. If a dog is overweight, throwing them into a long-distance forced march is a recipe for orthopedic injury.
The metabolic reality is that exercise alone cannot counteract massive caloric surpluses, especially in a small breed where an extra half cup of kibble is a huge percentage of their daily allowance. Weight loss requires increasing their activity through gradual, frequent, low-impact sessions while strictly managing intake.
So synthesizing all of this down to the day-to-day routine, there's a concept in athletic conditioning that applies here. The warm-up and the cool-down.
Ah, yes.
I read that and immediately pictured putting a terrier through a dynamic stretching routine like an Olympic sprinter. But it's really about regulating the nervous system and lactic acid, right?
It is about shifting physiological gears. If you are about to embark on a demanding hike or a fast run, you initiate it with an easy, slow walk to increase blood flow to the muscles and prepare the cardiovascular system.
Makes sense.
And critically, when you finish, you don't just throw them in the back of the car to immediately stiffen up. You wind down gently with another easy walk to help process lactic acid and safely lower their heart rate back to a resting baseline.
And it gives you a dedicated window to do that full-body awareness check, monitoring their respiratory rate, watching their gait for subtle limps, checking their coat.
The true value of those routine checks is that you become deeply intimately attuned to your dog's specific biological baseline. You are building an internal early warning system.
Because you know what normal looks like.
Right. Because you know exactly how fast they normally recover, you will instantly notice when something is fundamentally off long before it escalates into a catastrophic medical emergency.
That is such an empowering takeaway. So, looking at the big picture, we have shattered several massive behavioral misconceptions today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did.
Yeah.
First, small working dogs like Westies do not just need a quick bathroom break on the grass. They need robust, purposeful engagement. Second, sheer physical exhaustion is not the goal neurological satisfaction is. A dog that just ran 5 miles might still be an anxious wreck if its brain wasn't utilized.
Very true.
Third, if your dog is excavating your garden right after a long walk, it simply means their seeking system is begging for a job. And finally, a fenced-in yard is not an automated exercise machine. It's merely a venue for you to go outside and actively collaborate with your animal.
The ultimate objective for you, listening to this, is learning to fluently read the animal in front of you. By providing what researchers term better matched exercise activity that directly speaks to the evolutionary purpose this specific terrier was engineered for, you construct a foundation of deep behavioral health.
And it builds that bond, too.
Absolutely. Once you establish their normal drive and recovery, you'll immediately notice the subtle cues. A slight hesitation at the door, fatiguing unusually fast, or a sudden disinterest in investigating the environment. You become their most effective health advocate simply because you know their normal better than anyone else.
It takes the mystery completely out of the equation. But, unpacking all of this canine psychology leaves me with one final, much broader thought.
Oh.
We have spent centuries selectively breeding these animals to possess a vital, razor-sharp purpose. To hunt, to analyze, to problem solve, to work relentlessly alongside us in harsh conditions. And today we put a designer collar on them, place them in our perfectly climate-controlled living rooms, and expect them to be perfectly content sitting idly on a cushion.
It's a huge shift.
And as we've clearly seen, physical survival without mental engagement leaves a working dog deeply frustrated, anxious, and highly destructive.
It is a guaranteed recipe for a behavioral crisis.
But consider the human parallel. In this modern, highly automated world, where so many of our own daily survival problems have been optimized and solved for us, we often find ourselves pacing our own metaphorical living rooms. Maybe the next time you feel a wave of restlessness or low-level anxiety or inexplicable frustration, you don't just need to go run mindless miles on a treadmill to burn off the energy. Maybe you too just need a genuinely difficult problem to solve.